The polluter's paradox refers to the phenomenon where highly polluting companies or industries are the ones that spend the most money on political lobbying and advertising. Because they face the greatest threat of regulation or public backlash, they disproportionately fund political campaigns and advocacy groups to evade oversight. Welcome to the Atlantic Current. I am Vince Martin, here as always with Tull McAdoo from the Irish Politics newsletter. As many listeners likely have guessed from that introduction, we are talking about Aughinish, the alumina plant in County Limerick, which Tull, I think, definitely qualifies as one of those highly polluting companies that may have some pretty significant incentive to avoid public backlash.
The public backlash has begun, and you talk about the polluter's paradox is that the company always ends up having to pumping more money into, making everything look all right via lobbying and advertising. But eventually when these guys pull out, it's always a taxpayer that has to pay the cleaning up of the site.
Of course, yeah.
I mean, this is not unique to Ireland. It happens all over the world. And the reason why Aughinish Aluminum is under the microscope is because there have been claims that their material that they're exporting to Russia have been getting into the weapons production logistics and are being used to manufacture bombs, drones, missiles, chemical weapons in Syria.
How about
It's
that?
not just about Ukraine, it's about other munitions that have been used around the world by Russia also. So the spotlight began to be shone on them recently after an investigation by the Irish Times and another transnational organisation that looks into these things, and they found that 83% of everything that was exported out of Limerick, out of Aughinish, was ending up in Russia.
Right. And the plant is owned by a Russian company, right? That part of it is not necessarily surprising. Maybe something that should have been understood a little earlier, perhaps?
No, it was understood, but the Irish government lobbied quite heavily for the plant to be removed from any kind of sanctions involving Russia. Right, so the Irish government lobbied for this. So the ultimate owner of this plant, Oleg Deripaska, is one of Putin's cronies.
Yeah, he is notorious enough that if you don't know this story, you have probably heard his name. He has been one of the oligarchs in the inner circle there for a very, very long time. And the fact that he hasn't accidentally fallen out of a window suggests he's probably a pretty canny political operator, right?
Yes, of course. He's been sanctioned by Europe, the USA. He's been sanctioned by all the people that want to see all the bad things happen in the Ukraine stop. We sanction him, but we don't sanction his plant. That's a bit strange, isn't it?
Certainly, if you put it that way, yeah.
The guy has been found to be involved in all manner of weapons production for Mother Russia, and he has been sanctioned by all the people, by the United Nations, the EU. There's limits on his bank accounts was shut down all over Europe, this kind of stuff. But he's still allowed to operate his factory in Limerick. It makes an absolute mockery. When I see Micheál Martin stick his mug on national television and make those weird noises that he makes about Ireland being strictly neutral, well, he's either lying or he's a particularly stupid person. And I don't think he's a particularly stupid person, all right? Because this alumina that is going to Russia is not being made for tinfoil hats or giant bags of Kit Kats or cans of Coke. The sheer amount that's been exported to Russia would make it almost impossible for materials not to be. It'd be surprising if it wasn't getting into the weapons manufacturing. It's implausible.
Yeah, and I mean, that is one thing worth pointing out. This is a massive plant by the standards of Europe. It's the largest such plant in Europe now.
It's the large alumina plant in Europe at the moment. Yeah. Yes, it is. It's 1.8 million tons on average each year. And for that 1.8 million tons, I think it leaves another 2 tons in pollution behind it. So it's quite a heavy industry, quite a toxic industry. And as we'll come to further down the line, there has been a lot of very serious allegations made against the plant.
Not just about where the alumina is going, correct?
No, there's been some very, very serious environmental allegations, which I do believe personally that implicate Micheál Martin and current members of the civil service.
Wow. Okay. That's a significant claim.
And this is not just Tull or the podcast having a go. It's been well documented going all the way back to 1988, 1989. And we have the newspaper articles and we're going to post them to our Substack so people can read them for themselves and draw their own conclusions. I also believe that RTE are investigating certain issues at the moment in regards to plant. It won't be just us. There's going to be a whole barrage of more things coming down the line. And of course, this was all kicked off by another Irishman who was recently awarded the Hero of Ukraine for his journalistic endeavours in exposing Russia.
Caelan Robertson, yeah. I believe he's from County Limerick. Oh, no, he's from Kilkenny. I'm sorry.
Kilkenny, yes.
Pretty sure.
You get murdered in parts of Ireland for saying that's the wrong thing like that.
I'm just a dumb American. We've done over 50 episodes now. If listeners have not figured out that I'm only slightly less ignorant than the average Yank, that's really on them. Apologies to the citizens of both fine counties who I just offended. But yeah, it has been interesting to see it blow up, because the point you're making, there are newspaper articles from the 1990s. There are investigations in traditional media. And Robertson himself, to his credit, has said multiple times that he is relying on a lot of the work that other journalists did. He's not just kind of going out there and pretending that, as some of these new media journalists do, he's not pretending that he just found this story that no one else knew about. So it has been a long history that you can see.
The Ukraine ambassador actually, I think it was in 2022, asked the Irish government to shut the place down, and they refused.
Wow. Okay.
So when I look at Irish politicians and say, yeah, we're strictly neutral, I'm saying you're lying through your teeth, pal. We're not.
Yeah.
And, we never have been. We're a Western-aligned, geopolitical, liberal country. Our home is in the EU. Our home is in Western Europe. We are not strictly neutral by any stretch of any imaginations. Militarily, we're clearly not. I saw one politician come out and say that, it's not as high as 83%. It might be only 45%. Okay. But, 45% of 1.9 million tons, is still 0.9 million, nearly a million tons going into Russian weapons production. So we're all okay with that, yeah?
Yeah, it doesn't seem like there's a percentage threshold here where it's perfectly fine or an acceptable trade-off, for sure.
This stuff has been going into chemical weapons that was used in Syria as well, probably. Yeah. And the Sahel in Africa. This is not confined to just Ukraine. It's wherever Russia have been, engaging in their various amounts of war crimes. This material from Aughinish and Limerick is beginning that weapons supply trade.
With these obvious concerns, why is the plant still running? Why was Ukraine rebuffed in 2022 when they asked to shut the plant down?
Well, it's the oldest story in history, isn't it?
This is one of those questions I think I probably knew the answer to, but I need to ask to make sure we get some color on it, right?
It's the oldest story in history, going back donkey's years, and it's not confined to Ireland. I remember there's a ton of environmental movies out there about, local politicians ignoring concerns because of jobs. I think it employs about 475 staff and a wider support of 1,000 jobs in total in the area. And that's ultimately it. Jobs. It's a very kind of poor part of Ireland, for want of a better word. In terms of industrial output, it was always incredible farming part of the world, primarily dairy farming and horses, a lot of big horsey country as well. But in the 70s and 80s, Ireland was an economic backwater, and the plan was to turn Shannon and Foynes, because it was a deep harbour there, a deep water river there, Foynes, turning into an industrial heartland. Maybe not, I suppose not all that similar to Detroit, perhaps. Turn into a motor city, turn surrounding areas of Ennis, Limerick, North Kerry into an industrial heartland and bring tens of thousands of jobs there. I know it worked up to a point, but the reality of the situation, Dublin is the capital city, so that's where the majority of the jobs ended up anyway. So.
Right.
In 1983, the sod was turned in Aughinish, and the red rock, the bauxite that's imported from Guinea and Brazil, started to be transmuted into alumina. The exports took off there from the world on, and it was, in a place like Ashkeaton, where Aughinish is located, there's not a lot of money there. There wouldn't have been any money there in the 80s. These were very high-paying and well-paid jobs.
Yeah, and just consistent jobs. I mean, yeah. That's a story that's well known in America, and we kind of are on the backside of that now. And I know of one that's happened last year, a town of, I believe, like 2,500, 3,000 people in Virginia. The major plant closed, and the town, it's hard to describe where the town is without expletives, right? I mean, they're just, once that plant closes, those jobs are gone. All the secondary jobs are gone. The restaurants are going to get crushed. It's a story that's known in America in areas like that. Both the absolute pressing desire of local politicians to get an employer like that because it can be transformative, and then the absolute terror of what happens when you lose that employer, because it can, without exaggeration, in some cases, just lead to the end of the town.
These are absolutely genuine concerns and shouldn't be dismissed out of hand. But we have to weigh up, are we strictly neutral or not? When Micheál Martin comes out and says we are strictly neutral, well, as I said earlier, 83% of that material is ending up in Russia. We are not strictly neutral by any international conventions. We are not, and I had to laugh that said that the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment is doing an investigation, and Caelan Roberts went down, he got some samples from the site, and he's taken them back to Ukraine to be paired against Russian missiles that have landed in Ukraine.
Against the fragments, how about that? Yeah.
And funny enough, I don't think the Department of Enterprise is doing that, is it?
Yeah.
So they can make all the mealy-mouthed noises that they want, but the reality of the situation is it's journalists that expose this, and it'll be journalism that decides, its ultimate fate. But there is 1,000 jobs on the line. It'd be a huge blow to the economy, but Ireland has to, pull its socks up now and decide, what are we? What are we going to do here? And as I said earlier, there are environmental concerns about this place going back to the 80s. And without the war in Ukraine happening, this place should have been shut down probably a long time ago.
Yeah, given the economic importance, you can see why politicians at the very least would just kind of prefer to turn a blind eye, as they have in so many similar situations. Are there political reasons for acting the same way?
Well, yes, there's 2 government TDs in the area, and obviously their seats would be at risk if it was shut down in the morning. So they're going to try and drag this out for as long as they can. But the Green Party MEP Kieran Cuff has come out very strongly saying the place needs to be shut down. And the Green Party, I'm not sure why they didn't shut it down actually when they were in power.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. It seems like this seems a little late for the actual Green Party.
Well, the Green Party blocked a road from Cork to Limerick, and they were leaving this hellhole pollution site open while blocking a road from Limerick to Cork. Come on. For that.
Yeah.
Now, in fairness, better late than never. Senator Tom Clonan, former army officer, advocate for parents and people with special needs, he was out of the blocks actually the very first person, look, that this place needs to be shut down, full stop. Their government parties are walking on a tightrope, okay? If they come out and say we're shutting this place down, come the next election, there's a good chance 1 or 2 of them are losing their seat. The EU reaction has actually been quite, a lot of people were kind of asleep to it. They weren't aware of what was going on. MEPs, the European Union, when governments look for exemptions and stuff like that, the sanctions, there's a wink and a nod usually given, but given the scale of what's going on in Ukraine and the Russian barbarity there, I don't think people could ignore it anymore.
How did that work in terms of the relation to the EU? Why is the EU allowing this shipment to begin with? You said there's an exemption to the sanctions?
There is an exemption, and the reason why, the Irish government lobbied pretty hard to say, look, give us an exemption for this. But, other governments' hands are not clean either. Italy, France, Switzerland, another famously neutral company, Germany, Siemens gear, a lot of their stuff is ending up in Russian weapons also. And it's probably wrong to call it a public relations push, but it's a push by pro-Ukrainian people across Europe saying, listen, we got to stop this, we're enabling Russia.
Yeah. And that includes Robertson, he's been in Ukraine for 4 years now, right?
Yes, he has. Yes, he's interviewed Zelensky on a number of occasions. He's a very smart young fellow. He's very with it. He's very on top of everything. Just try and get him on sometime, Vincent.
That's not a bad idea.
Look, it's about jobs at the end of the day. It's not about anything else.
Yeah.
It's not about morals. If it's about morals, the place would have been closed down a long time ago. So, Vincent, on an EU level, there was a campaign by some gentleman known as NAFO. I know you might have seen them online, pro-Ukrainian accounts and social media accounts. And it was started by a couple of guys or ladies, I'm not sure who they are, they're anonymous. Real Langer Dan, which must be a Cork man, probably related to him, at Galway Baywatch, at Ockers M, Punk NAFO, Ghost Kiev, Vatnik Soup. They started an online campaign and started...
I was just going to say, man, how journalism has changed.
Yes. Well, I wrote an article recently about a newspaper, an Irish politics publication closing down. And the reason why it closed down was because social media removed the gatekeepers, removed the need for them.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why they're gone. That's why they're closed down.
They also didn't hire Vatnik Soup, which you got to get with the times there.
Yes. So essentially what these people did, they started a pressure group or started emailing MEPs around the continent. And so far they've got 76 MEPs. No, it's, you know, there's 700 MEPs. Okay, it's not, people might not say it's a lot, but at the start of the campaign, there was no MEPs.
Yeah.
Okay, the campaign's kicked off maybe about 2 months ago. And have 76 MEPs across Europe now backing this campaign to shut the place down. Right, so I think it's getting stronger and stronger and more traction. Fair play to them for nailing their colours to the mast and doing things that maybe Irish politicians were afraid to do. Their goal is to put an end to, and not just in Ireland, I might add, European exports to the Russian Federation, anything that ended up in the, you know, weapons logistics supply chain and stuff like that. That's their ultimate goal. It's not just confined to Limerick, it's across Europe, but Limerick has been the launch pad for what they're trying to achieve at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, you can see why, because it is a story that you can really package into such a compelling piece. I mean, that is, to your point, you're talking about the Phoenix going down. This is one of the advantages of new media, of video journalism, particularly for a story like this. It's something that you can condense into a 3 or 4 minute tale with slickly produced graphics sometimes. And there are pluses and minuses to that approach there are plenty of people using that same approach to tell stories that, shall we say, maybe are not quite as true, but in this case, the efforts of NAFO and of Robertson, I think, do show what those techniques allow you to do if you can craft a story that grabs attention. And it does seem like this has grabbed a lot of attention in Ireland, right?
Yes, it has now. It has absolutely now grabbed a lot of attention in Ireland, but much to my shame and a lot of other people's shames, there have been things going on in Aughinish that have all the makings of a Hollywood movie. Pollution, cover-up, conspiracy, animal deaths, human deaths, cancer clusters. I mean, I'm surprised Russell Crowe or Mark Ruffalo haven't made a movie about the place.
Yeah. Someone is pitching a script on this somewhere in Hollywood. I have no doubt about that.
Yeah, I mean, it has all those makings of politics, toxic industrialism, and the foreign country interfering in our state affairs. It has all the blockbuster elements. When I first started looking into this, I have to say I wasn't particularly aware. I knew there was a big factory there. I knew there was a big industrial site there. But, you know, the country's littered with, massive industrial estates, for want of a better word. I didn't pay any attention till I went, oh, there's stuff all over the media here going back to the 80s about this place. Why am I only hearing about it now?
Yeah.
And it's because the plant itself has been very good at public relations and keeping stories buried. Aughinish has a fair claim, possibly being, number one, the most polluted site in Ireland, if not Western Europe. Number two, that has been a place that has been let down terribly by its politicians. There have been allegations going back all the way to the 80s. The first sod on the place was turned in 1983, Vincent. And less than 5 years later, allegations began to emerge of, they're not allegations, they are documented incidences of animals being born deformed, cancer clusters, people's health failing. And this is not pseudoscience, this is not a conspiracy theory, this is documented in your Irish Times, your Irish Examiner, your Irish Independent, the local newspapers in Limerick. They've been documenting the pollution that's been going on here since the 80s, the late 80s. And I'm quite aghast that it's been ignored for so long. And it's taken a war 2,000 miles away in the Ukraine to actually bring to light the terribleness and the awfulness of what's been happening down in Aughinish in the last 40 years.
Took a war and another 4 years. It really is stunning.
Shocking. No, I was in correspondence with the Kappa Farmers Group down there, a man called Pat Gagan. I was unable to get him on the phone when I tried to ring him today, but he's documented quite extensively everything that's been going on there. And it's not just him been documenting it. As I said, the newspapers have been documenting it. These are not allegations that have been pulled from somebody's backside. These are well documented, you know. Human health is also suffering. You know, women who had 1 miscarriage, had 2 people, cancer clusters, people's hair falling out. The state was forced to call an investigation in the late 80s and early 90s. 5 of the worst affected farms over the 90s with problems were picked for a 2-year investigation over 1997 and 1998, and 27 other farms in lesser study. And the long and short of it is, without going through every single document, is that the results disappeared, Vincent.
What do you mean by disappeared? They were that no one knows where they went. Okay, they were never released.
Yes. So in 1998, they were informed by someone who headed up the health investigation that their sample had gone missing, and in fact, the samples had gone missing much previously, but nobody was told.
Yeah, you're at about 45 minutes into the script for our blockbuster there. That's like the big Act 2 twist, right? We've got all the problems. We have the investigation. And then suddenly the scientists realize that the samples have been pilfered. And suddenly we realize there's much more to the story than we thought, right?
They did a bit of an investigation. They said the samples were lost due to human error in the post.
That's the same excuse I used to give when I was behind on my rent when I was 22 years old. I'm not really sure that's supposed to satisfy this kind of investigation.
So the EPA granted Aughinish their license in May, June 1998 to, be able to pollute X amount or whatever the case may be. Their license been given and the samples going missing at the same time coincided. So it's a terrible coincidence, Vincent. An awfully very big coincidence, Pat Geoghegan met with Micheál Martin on at least 3 occasions, tried to figure out what's going on here. And the long and short of it is, Micheál Martin promised an inquiry to find out what was going on and then reneged on having it.
What was Martin's position at the time?
He was Minister for Health, Vincent, at the time.
Oh, cool.
Famously, at the time he banned smoking in pubs in Ireland as well.
That son of
yeah, stop it now, lad, smoking in pubs. That's his claim to fame, I think. So we have no definite reason why Micheál Martin did not go ahead with the inquiry, but Micheál Lehan, an RTE journalist, he's a very prominent Irish political journalist, was trying to break the story with the Irish Examiner in 2002. He was the man essentially that said Micheál Martin was not going ahead with the review and they weren't going to get a public inquiry. But they'd already spent €5.3 million trying to figure out actually what happened and what went on there, and they just shut it down point blank. Nothing.
Huh.
Okay? And when Micheál Martin became Taoiseach, he ignored, documented evidence. Essentially, Micheál Martin ignored what's going on there for the last 40 years. I was looking back on interviews with Micheál Martin recently, and I was looking at him, and he seems very testy when you bring up Aughinish in particular, because Micheál Martin was the Minister for Health at the time in the 90s when all this was come to light about how bad the pollution was going on there. I'm quoting from the Irish Examiner, Vincent, so nobody's intending on suing us or anything like that. I'm quoting Michael Lehan in the Irish Examiner. So the pathologist at the centre of the probe may have worked privately for some of the industries suspected of causing pollution in the area. Okay, as far as I'm aware, there's only one big industry in the area.
No.
So you had a pathologist working for the health board and the pollution guys. Another issue with Micheál Martin was he publicly promised he would review how the pathology samples went missing. Didn't happen. No, they got lost in the post and that was it. The thing was shut down. Okay? Once again, we're dealing with facts here, they're not allegations, right? So this area is actually quite a small part of Limerick. It's like jutting out into the Shannon.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a huge area. So 96 animals die in a fella called Liam Summers Farm over a 5-year period, okay? 90 horses and foals die on Andy Sheehy's land since 1991. 130 cattle die prematurely on Paddy Sheehy's farm over 11 years. I'm not a farmer, but from a rural part of Ireland, that's a very high number,
Yeah.
There were 64 human cancer cases, including 39 deaths in an area with a population of 800 people. Okay?
Wow. Yeah, because you do hear those stories in the U.S. about that stuff, and there's some, it's X number of people, but it's in a county that's got, 200,000 people or whatever. Even just off the top of your head, you can realize it's probably not abnormal. That number is pretty stunning when you're getting into the high single-digit percentage here.
Yeah, I mean, the EPA claimed that bad farming practices, such as the spreading of lime, is contributing to animal deaths in Askeaton. And I can tell you, Vincent, as a man from a rural part of Ireland, that's complete bollocks. Nobody's doing it.
You don't think the farmers are intentionally doing something that will poison
They have thousands of animals.
Poison the animals that are providing their livelihood?
Yeah, these guys have probably been farming that land for the last 200, 300, 500 years, Vincent.
Yeah,
and all of a sudden they're having hundreds of animal deaths, and there's a big lurking red pit that feels over.
Yeah,
I mean, Occam's razor here, pal. Never mind what's going on here, and again, we've political complicity going on here. The Public Accounts Committee at the time wouldn't release a full breakdown on the money spent on the EPA investigation. Okay? Why don't you just release everything and let it all out into the open? If you've nothing to hide, let it all out in the open, you know?
Right.
And the Department of the Agriculture refused kind of introduce a screening mechanism or ongoing monitoring system to find out what was going on here. I mean, it is all the makings of, as I said, of a blockbuster movie, and 1.9 million tonnes are exported on average every year. I'm sure it's 1.7 some years, 2 million in other years. So for every tonne that's exported, 2 tonnes of pollution are left behind, Vincent.
And as you said, it's not a big area, right?
The farming area is not a big area. It's not a particularly big spot of Ireland. Ireland's not a big country anyway, full stop. But
yeah.
There's 450 acres down there of toxic sludge sitting there waiting to, burst. And these things have an awful habit of bursting because the walls that are used to build them are not normal walls. What they're essentially using is they're packing the sludge together and making a wall out of it, okay? So they're not, probably not the most solid structures in the world. And have you been to the Burren, Vincent?
Yeah.
You've been to the Burren. There's like the moon or something, apparently. I don't know.
Yeah.
I've driven by it. I just load of rocks. But anyway, that's my Neanderthalism there. But that whole part of that is not far from the Burren there, Ashkeaton. It's just over the river. And it's all limestone. Limestone's quite porous.
Yeah, of course,
right?
yeah.
So this stuff is seeping down somewhere. They've also in the past been prosecuted for not revealing that there actually was environmental stuff, leaking into the river and leaking into the soil and that kind of thing. And I think at the time, they were given a fine of €1,270 or pounds.
Wow.
That's all the fine was. So, Vincent, there's 450 acres of toxic sludge there. I presume you looked at the photographs and you looked at what it looks like. Yeah. It's like the surface of Mars there. So it's 450 acres is about 340 of your American football pitches and about 100 full-size GA pitches in Ireland.
Yeah.
It's an incredible amount. It's quite toxic. It's quite dangerous. Even if nothing was going on with Ukraine and Russia, this is actually a massive environmental problem.
And a problem that, to your point, seems to have been, in the most generous interpretation, ignored, and in the more sinister interpretation, actively covered up. As you said, there are facts. This is not allegations. This is not Facebook posts. There are documented facts for decades saying that something's gone wrong here. It is one of those stories that very quickly becomes infuriating, even if you have no personal direct involvement in it, that these problems can last that long without someone somewhere stepping in to at least try.
Well, it appears nobody's trying. And the company have actually been quite aggressive over the years in trying to protect their reputation and trying to protect what goes on there. They haven't been, sitting on their hands and saying, oh, no, we're innocent and all this. They've actually been quite aggressive in trying to defend their interests and that. But I mean, when you get into the geopolitical exercises of, defending Russia's interests at the moment, you're on a very slippery, bloody slope, aren't you?
Yeah.
I mean, how can you defend sending war materials to Russia? Nobody can. No, you're going to have an awful time as a politician defending that. There's an investigation ongoing at the moment into the plant and where their materials are ending up because there was 2 different sets of numbers given out. The CSO, Central Statistics Office, came out with one set of statistics and the plant came out with a different set of statistics. Somebody's lying and they're investigating where exactly the materials are ending up and what exactly they're ending up in. I'm not entirely sure how the Department of Enterprise are going to find out exactly how or where the materials are ending up without taking some samples themselves, and they haven't done that. So the journalists have done that. So
they're just going to watch Caitlin's YouTube in a couple of weeks.
Well,
just read it up.
I suspect very strongly, and this is the very deeply cynical part of me thinking here, is that the report is going to come out and then a bombshell is going to come out with, the fact saying that actually, no, your report is a whitewash because we found different results to you. And that's these things always happen, isn't it?
Of course,
so It's not going away anytime soon. There's a concerted public relations effort going on across Europe at the moment to have it shut down. I think personally it should be shut down, not only for the Russian reason, but because I've seen the evidence, I've looked very closely, and it is an environmental disaster waiting to happen, and it is an ongoing environmental disaster. The Kappa Farmers Support Group will tell you that. Anybody that lives in the area will tell you that. And there's been sinister mutterings as well. During the last attempted expansion of the plant, there were allegations made online that the people who objected to it, their names were put on a notice board locally, and they were approaching the pub saying, why are you against our jobs? Why do you want to take our jobs away from us?
Yeah.
So there's quite dark, sinister undertones going on there also at the moment that, I hate to use this term, the mainstream media, but they're not reporting what's going on down there. There has been intimidation going on apparently also. And as I said about the mainstream media today, the mainstream media were all over the pollution and the awfulness of what's been going on down there for the last 40 years. I'm looking at an article saying the health report from the area is met with stunned but disbelief. This is from a journalist called Norma Foley at Limerick.
What year was that?
2001.
Yeah.
2001, 25 years ago. I'm looking at this at the moment, and I'm surprised it's taken this long for people to focus on it so much, but it was primarily because of the efforts of that, it should be said, Irish Times investigation, and then it got ramped up with Caelan Robertson's, his investigations also. I mean, he's done incredible work there. He's done the state some service. So I just wonder what's going on with, and I say this in air quotes, mainstream media when there's absolutely a wealth. I have currently nearly 300 newspaper articles going back to 1997 about what's been going on down there. This thing's been hiding in plain sight, Vincent.
Right. Yeah, there's an interesting analog to that here in the U.S. The analog here is a guy named Nick Shirley, who became famous starting last year for these YouTube videos where he was allegedly uncovering fraud at daycares run by Somali Americans in Minnesota. And I do want to differentiate between Shirley and Robertson because I think Robertson has shown a lot more ethics and a lot more balance. What Shirley did in the first of his videos that really took off, he just went to these daycare centers with a camera and he said, hey, can we come in? We need to check that you guys actually have children here. We think you're running a fraud. And of course, the people at the daycare center are like, what? No, we're not just letting random dudes with a camera come into a daycare center. That's not how it works. And then, of course, Shirley goes out front. Oh, it's a fraud. There's no kids in there. It's still debated to what extent he actually found any fraud at all. There are ones that he went to on this video where the state went in 3 weeks later and they're like, yeah, there's 12 kids here. They weren't hiding something. Doesn't matter where you are. If you run a daycare center, some 23-year-old dude with a camera is not allowed to just walk in and film your daycare center for obvious reason. But there was a narrative on the right that, oh, he uncovered this fraud that no one was talking about. It's the same deal. The quote mainstream media, including local outlets in Minneapolis, had covered the fraud for years. The New York Times had talked about it in 2022. There were 95 arrests over fraud connected to a program that was instituted during the coronavirus pandemic. All these stories were out there. There was absolutely an avenue for anybody to kind of inflame the right and make themselves famous. And Shirley has made himself legitimately famous. He has now testified in front of Congress. He's been reposted by Vance. He is a legitimately famous right-wing influencer off this story. The elements are out there for even someone like Fox News to put these elements together and create a national story and a national trend. I think one of the problems is there's just attention for the mainstream media is if you go to work at the Irish Times, your goal is to do massive investigations into corruption, into environmental abuse, into the effects of large corporations. That goal, it's in tension with the goal of getting views on YouTube, with the ability to market that story. Right. I think it's very difficult to be someone who can find the story and knows how to market that story and knows kind of what buttons to push on YouTube. And what Shirley and Robertson show, I think, in very different ways, is how valuable that marketing skill can be. And again, one obvious difference is Robertson has given credit to the people who did a lot of the work. Shirley has presented much of his work as if he's just the one who discovered it, which I think for his audience is probably more effective. Robertson kind of honed those techniques on the right. He worked with Tommy Robinson in the UK. What's the don't get sued word? Can we say infamous? The infamous Tommy Robinson? I'm sure many listeners know. And And then Robertson has disavowed a lot of what he did, and talked about how when he worked for Robinson and other people like them, he used deceptive editing processes and trying to take videos out of context in a way to tell a narrative that maybe wasn't true. Kind of the glory and the horror of what he has done is that you can see what those methods can do if they're used for good, if they actually are used to tell a story, which, as you say, I think is relatively accurate. But it's also a method, as we said before, that can be used towards much more sinister and damaging ends.
Yes, and he has highlighted everything that's kind of wrong with Aughinish. You know, Ireland's alumina exports to Russia surged by 55% since the war started, right?
Oh man, yeah, that's boy. You don't want to jump to conclusions off one data point, correlation, causation, but good Lord, that one jumps out, yeah.
In 2024, it shipped around half its output, worth 400 million, to just 2 Russian smelters.
No.
Okay. So there's a lot of that very circumstantial evidence, and quite frankly, if the Department of Trade and Enterprise come back saying, "Oh, no, there's nothing to see here," well, I pack it in politics. I think that's just bull. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think Robertson has shown power of social media in terms of how it can bypass traditional media completely and have the same impact. Now, in fairness to the Irish Times, Conor Gallagher, their security correspondent, has been excellent on this. He has been brilliant on this. He's been to the foremost, the best journalist on this in the country, and what's going on down there, in fairness. But that's from a security point of view. I wonder where all the environmental journalists are. Have they gone for a picnic? Have they gone doing kumbaya somewhere up in the Comera Mountains? I mean, they're nowhere to be found on this. And I actually think that what's been going on there environmentally for the last 40 years is almost as big a scandal as it's exporting materials to Russia. I think
in terms of how it happened, it seems like a bigger scandal. It seems more scandalous to be sending the product to Russia, but just simply the length of time and the fact that, as you're saying, this was not an undercover problem. People in the media knew, people in the government knew. No one was able to kind of pull the story together. Again, that's just kind of the nature of what journalism is for legacy outlets, but on the government side, there's 40 years of people in government who knew or should have known, right? I mean, that seems like the definition of a scandal.
No, like I have another newspaper article here in front of me. We're going to put these all up in our Substack so people know we're not peddling some conspiracy theory. But journalist Norma Prendeville, she wrote an article in Limerick on the 22nd of September 2002, I think it was, or 2001. I can't see the exact date, where there was a calls in the local council chamber in Limerick for the health board chief to quit over his handling of what was going on there with the health issues with people and animals and all the rest. So it was known.
Yeah.
It was known. Now, I want to know at the moment, where are all the environmental journalists for the last 40 years? Is it a case that their environmentalism is for sale because there's 1,000 jobs on the line? Or, in 2010, there was an incident in Hungary, a similar alumina plant. Its dam broke, caused tens of millions of damage, killed 10 people, injured another 500 people with long-lasting permanent damage to their respiratory and their eyesight and burns and all this kind of stuff. This place is a ticking time bomb. Apart from sending material for bombs to Russia, it is actually a ticking time bomb down there on the shores of the estuary of the Shannon. If that dam wall breaks and gets into the estuary, the damage is going to be unquantifiable. The Shannon is one of the country's main sources for drinking water, fishing, leisure activities. It would be an unheard of environmental disaster in Ireland. And quite frankly, over the years, the plant have been showing themselves not to be honest. They didn't report instances where there were environmental failures. Anybody that can look at that in that red sludge and say it's environmentally safe, well, I challenge those people, right, to take off your clothes, get into it, swim in it. Get into it, make a cup of tea out of the water that's coming out of it beside it. We'll make a cup of tea. Get in there, eat your swimming togs, Vincent, and have no swim in that toxic sludge, would you?
I think it'd probably be too cold for me, to be honest, but maybe that's not the most important.
Where did it go from here? We're going to come back, we're going to wait for the report, right? And this always happens. This is a time, it happens in Ireland, it happens all over Europe and the United States, is that the government will come out and say there's nothing to see here, and about 48 hours later, a bombshell will drop in journalism. Now, I'm going to let our listeners in on something, but my belief is, and my understanding is, another national newspaper has got hold of samples from the site as well also, and they're doing tests. So it's not just Robertson, who probably hit on the bright idea himself, but another national media organisation, not us, somebody else, has got their hands on samples. So I'm in the time-honoured tradition of politicians coming out saying nothing to see here, and then 48 hours later, a journalist is going to come out with another story about the rest. Actually, in fact, there's loads to see here.
Is this something where the people involved, whether that's the government or the owner of the plant, can kind of run out the clock, keep kicking the can down the road until public opinion goes away? Or do you think that there's just kind of, to use a bad metaphor in the context of what we're saying, that the dam actually has broken?
So, put my politics hat on. I think there's only one option here for the government, and that's to nationalise the plant.
Wow. Okay. Is that something that you guys can even do? I mean, that's not an option that would be available here.
Yeah, we can legally do that. Okay, we can legally do that, and that's an option. And I think my understanding was that from talking to people in politics that it was actually discussed in 2022. And I don't know why did not go ahead with it, but I mean, the owner of the plant is Russian sanctioned, so what's he going to do?
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay, I think the only option here is for this will be in a medium to long-term option, I suspect. But at the way Ukraine is beating Russia at the moment, who knows how long this is going to go on at the moment. But I think that's the only option for the government. I don't think they have any other options. To take control of the plant, to keep the jobs ticking over, how they're going to square the pollution that goes on there. And what's going to happen there is that once they take the plant over, everybody else is going to start attacking the government. Why don't you do something about the pollution?
That was going to be my response. I'm not sure that necessarily works. The attitude of the government for 4 decades clearly has been to just try and pretend nothing's going on here. It is a lot harder to pretend that when the government actually owns the business. The flip side is, to your point, it may be the least worst option. I
think it's the only option. I don't even think it's a case of least worst options or whatever the case may be. It is the only option, I think, on the table at the moment. And again, we're going to have to see what happens with the report and the blowback from that. But I think, so you have the Alumina 22 people, those 5 largely anonymous accounts pushing the narrative here, which has been very good, very successful, of which I'm very supportive of. I must add, I'm going to name my colours to the mast there. I'm not going to pretend to be anything other. 4 out of 5 of these people or 3 out of 5 anyway, at least, are Irish people. So it was Irish people that started off this process of exposing, and Conor Gallagher, of exposing what was going on in Aughinish. Yeah. Okay. So it was Irish people pushing this also. It kind of ruffles me the wrong way that when I see people from Europe saying, oh, look at Ireland, what are they doing here? I'm like, it's Irish people that exposed this. Yeah. It's Irish people that are making this happen. It's not anybody else making it happen. It's Irish people pushing for the welfare of the Ukrainians and the welfare of the local environment and getting this place shutting down. It's not external pressure, because when you get to the level of politics that Micheál Martin's at, you can make mealy-mouthed noises all you want with your European colleagues, and it's a wink and a nudge, and everybody knows what you're talking about. You don't sanction us in Limerick, and we won't sanction you in whatever you're doing, whatever part of your country. That's the way it operates.
Of course, yeah.
So it's high-level politics, but it's Irish people pushing this on the ground.
That sounds like a wonderful ending for the blockbuster movie. All right. We'll get some orchestra music going. We'll get the Irish flag flying. Proud Irish journalists and influencers working to bring to an end what I think we can safely call a 40-year scandal, hopefully.
I think there's something on the horizon for the plant. I'm not entirely sure what it is, but it couldn't come at a more awkward time for the government, Vincent. These revelations about Aughinish Alumina have put the government in a terribly sticky wicket, a terribly awkward position at the worst possible time as they look to take over the presidency of the European Council.
Wow. I had forgotten about that part. Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Wow.
So you're going to have Italians, Germans, Americans, of course, CNN, Fox News asking, what's supposed to be exporting material for Russian weapons? Not a great look. They're on the back foot even before their European presidencies kicked off. So, Vincent, this is not the end of this. This is an ongoing issue. It's not going away anytime soon, and I don't be surprised if we're talking about it very soon after that report comes out and the government are wringing their hands or somebody's necks trying to figure out what to do about it. So, I'm Tull from the Irish Politics Newsletter.
And I'm Vince Martin from Wall Street in Maine. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye now.